Hello and welcome to the Joe Ligato Show. I'm your host, Dr. Joe Ligato, and today we're going to be reading an article from Yahoo Finance on how America is now paying more in interest on its record $33 trillion debt than on national defense. And here's who holds the IOUs. So let's see what this article has to say. All right. So we have. All right. So America's gross national debt hit an eye-watering 33 trillion for the first time in September, mere months after eclipsing the $32 trillion mark earlier in the year. Okay, so over $1 trillion of extra debt in this past year alone. The United States is also currently spending more to pay interest on the national debt than it does on national defense, according to the Treasury's monthly statements. So that should be concerning to you. America, its entire currency is backed up by military power and also by being used in trade of energy. So the petrodollar is waning, it's going away. And so the only real thing that the United States has going for it when it comes to backing up its dollar as the global trade and reserve currency is its status of the military and of the threat of military force if countries do not use the United States dollar. And we're seeing that the United States is paying so much in interest that even that is not enough. And even the interest on our national debt far exceeds, or at the very least exceeds, the national defense spending, which should be concerning. Let's see what else it has to say here. In the current fiscal year through August, the Treasury has shelled out $807 billion in interest on its debt securities, while the Department of Defense budget for military programs totaled just $695 billion. Oh, that actually is a pretty significant difference between the interest rate or the interest amount and the Defense Department. Over an extra $1 billion. Wow, this is particularly alarming when you consider how much of the federal budget goes into defense, with the United States outspending every other country, and it's really outspending the next few competitors combined. So that should be pretty concerning in general, that the United States, its interest payments are so high. Last few years have been expensive. Deficit is what happens when the government spends more money in a fiscal year than it brings in through taxes, and the last few years have been expensive for the United States. Several large bills with hefty price tags have been approved since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic, including the American Rescue Plan Act, which cost $1.9 trillion. The Congressional Budget Office estimates a debt ceiling package that was signed into law this summer to prevent a national default could result in a $1.5 trillion decrease in deficit over the next decade. I don't know if I believe that. However, the Committee for the Responsible Budget, CRFB, a nonprofit that addresses federal budget and fiscal issues, says savings could fall to $1 trillion depending on side deals that fall outside of the agreement. Okay. And I doubt it's even going to help that much at all. Getting the debt under control will require taking a serious look at healthcare, Social Security, and the tax code, said CRFB President Maya McGuinness said in a news release. Much of the borrowing in the past couple of years happened while interest rates were historically low, but now that they're not, with prices still climbing, the cost of this debt will be amplified. Nearly $2 billion is spent every day just in interest on the national debt, according to Peter G. Peterson Foundation. Nearly $2 billion is spent every day just in interest. Wow. Imagine having so much debt accumulated that you have $2 billion in interest payments per day. And when the government owes a lot, it makes it harder for corporations to borrow money. Federal debt squeezes out other debts in the economy, said Philip Braun, clinical professor of finance at Northwestern University's Kellogg School of Management, told MoneyWise last year. So I've been talking about this a lot. The United States just does not have the money to continue to prop itself up. It's been using fake money, just completely made up money that doesn't hold any value for so long, and it's just printing more and more of it in order to stem the problem that is arising, in order to slow down the fact that America just cannot ever pay its debt. It cannot get back to a place where it's actually a country that provides value instead of just printing money, changing some decimal places on a sheet of paper in order to provide wealth, in order to provide value to the world. So I say this all the time, but America is collapsing. It may not seem like it in your day-to-day life, but it is definitely collapsing. And it's going slowly now, but it's going to go much faster in the upcoming years. There's only so much money in the economy. So with the government borrowing such large amounts, there's only so much that people are willing to lend overall in the economy. So it pushes out other types of borrowing. Okay, so since the United States is borrowing so much money, the government is borrowing so much money, other people cannot borrow, and so they can't use that money to benefit themselves in the long term. The government could have refinanced its debt while interest rates were low, but it didn't, which means that the borrowing costs today and into the future are unnecessarily higher because of that. So who owns America's national debt? Okay, so interesting stuff here. I think it's going to be a little bit of a surprise for people given what I know about this topic. There are different kinds of national debt. Think about it like having a credit card, a mortgage, and a car payment. All represent debt, but are different. The United States Department of Treasury manages the national debt by splitting it into two different types: debt that one government agency owes to another, and debt that is held by the public. Intragovernmental debt accounts for about $6.8 trillion of the national debt. Okay, so we said it's $33 trillion of debt. So when we say other governments own our debt, it's not really the case that the majority is owned by other governments. 6.8 trillion of the national debt, according to the CRFB. The much bigger piece of the debt is held by the public. Right now, that's about $26.2 trillion. Foreign governments, as well as the banks and private investors, state and local governments, and the Federal Reserve own most of this debt. And it's held in treasury securities, bills, and bonds. For foreign governments and private investors are one of the biggest holders of the public debt, owning around $8 trillion. Okay? About 50% of this debt is held by private and public domestic entities, while the Federal Reserve Bank holds roughly 20%. But there is good news when it comes to the debt the Federal Reserve owns. The Federal Reserve owns a lot of government debt. Treasury does pay interest payments to the Federal Reserve, but then the Federal Reserve turns around and gives it back to the Treasury. That alleviates some of the issue. Okay, so 20% of the issue can be relieved by the Federal Reserve, but that's not saying overly much. It's only 20% of $33 trillion, over $33 trillion. So we see a warning sign here is that ultimately rising interest rates will only exacerbate the national debt, making it harder for the government to respond to a slowing economy. As we have seen with recent growth in inflation and interest rates, the cost of debt can mount suddenly and rapidly. So just going off these last two pieces here, having rising interest rates means that the United States can't stave off recessions for much longer. And I've been saying this for a while, that we had the 2007-2008 financial crisis, but we should have had another recession, another really great depression by this point in the United States. And we haven't, because the United States is staving that off by throwing money at the problem. But when you have rising interest rates, they can't throw money at that problem any longer. And so if you have money in United States dollars, I would strongly encourage you to put it, again, this isn't financial advice, but this is what I did. I do not have my money in United States dollars because of the fact that the United States dollar, I don't think it's going to be doing particularly well in upcoming years. Again, not financial advice. I'm not allowed to offer financial advice because then I would be responsible for your financial decisions. But I'm saying that from my perspective, I do not think the United States dollar is going to be doing particularly well in upcoming years. With more than $10 trillion of interest costs over the next decade, this compounding fiscal cycle will only continue to do damage to our kids and grandkids. So you should be as concerned as I am about this crisis. You can see President Joe Biden here is not concerned because he has Alzheimer's, what I call old-timers disease, and he's not able to function as a human being anymore. It's any question if he still has a pulse or not. So that is the situation we're in. We have senile people in charge of the United States. The United States debt is overwhelming at this point, and there's really no way to continue to stave off the recession that is inevitably coming to the United States. Michael Burry talks about this all the time, and he's completely right that a recession should have happened by now, and it should have been the biggest recession ever, but the United States keeps postponing it by throwing money at the problem. So interesting times that we live in. If you found this video to be particularly informative, helpful, please give us a thumbs up. It helps us in the algorithm, although the algorithm is very clearly suppressing us at this point. Please subscribe to our channel both on YouTube and on Rumble. We are pivoting more and more towards Rumble because of the suppression about certain topics that on YouTube. And leave us a comment in the comment box. I always read them. Any questions, comments, concerns, critiques. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have a good rest of your day. Bye.